What is going on, everyone? This is Cody here with Drew Code Sports Talk. I'm coming at you tonight with a brand new episode. No Andrew tonight, as what we've been kind of alluding to for the last few weeks, as he's got a pretty busy schedule. He's preparing for a Singer West game. They're having their blackout game tomorrow night as I'm recording this on Wednesday night, and so he's prepping for that. So I thought I'd bring you guys a solo episode. I've got a couple of things here that I wanted to talk to you guys about, so it shouldn't be too long at all. But I'm hoping that you guys enjoy it and you guys gravitate towards it and you guys enjoy it as well. So before I get started, though, go ahead and do me a favor. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. You can do it here on YouTube or you can do it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can do it on iHeart, whatever podcast platform you listen to your favorite podcast on. You can find us on there as well. And also, please don't forget to go and follow us on social media. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X or Twitter or whatever it's called. We're not too active on that one. And also you can find us on Threads. So find all that information down in the episode card down below. So that way you can follow us and keep up to date with all of our posts and everything like that. So without further ado, guys, let's get into the episode. We are on the cusp of the regular season of the NFL kicking off right now. As I'm recording this, like I said, it is Wednesday night. It's the 28th. Football is literally tomorrow. It starts a week countdown, essentially. Thursday night football, where there is, I believe it's the Chiefs versus the Lions. So everyone's excited for the regular season to get underway, and there's been a ton of movement. A lot of the storylines are starting to develop. Training camp is over. Every team has already narrowed down their 53-man roster. A lot of players are now starting to re-sign. Most notably, I think it was today or yesterday, it was CeeDee Lamb who signed his deal finally. Dak Prescott has not, though. But there's a ton of stuff that's going on. And honestly, too, within this episode, I just wanted to touch on, I wanted to give my 5 bold predictions on how I believe that the NFL season is going to, or 5 bold predictions I believe that will happen during the NFL season. And I wanted to run down them. I don't want to say fairly quickly, but I do want to create somewhat of a dialogue and a conversation to spark between you guys who are listening as I kind of present a little bit of this. And I have my thoughts about it, but I really want to know your guys'. So once you guys hear this, let me know down below if it's out of pocket or you vibe with it or whatever the case may be. So kicking off, and as I said, Thursday night football is coming. I believe it's the the Lions, and it is the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe, are kicking off Thursday night football. I have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the two teams that are matching up together on Thursday night football. But one of my top storylines out of the 5 of my bold predictions is I don't think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to three-peat this season. And, they are, in fact, probably in a better position than they were last year to even repeat again as champions for the 3rd time, which has never happened in the NFL's history. Last season they came in, there's a lot of question marks on if they can repeat what they had done. The receiving core that they had, not very good. And throughout the season last year, the Chiefs just, bound together and they persevered, and they ended up, obviously, as everyone knows, going all the way to the Super Bowl and winning in a Chiefs fashion where they came back from behind. I would say they did have a lot of help from the Swifties and having a lot of that, a lot of that energy that helped kind of fuel them, and obviously brought a lot of new audience to the NFL, which is pretty cool. But anyways, my first bold prediction of the NFL season is I don't think the Chiefs are going to three-peat. Maybe it's not so bold. Maybe it's pretty much what everyone assumes is going to happen. But, a couple of points that I wanted to point out with the Chiefs is that, again, no team has ever three-peated before. And so this would be the first time in NFL history. I don't know if that's going to motivate the Chiefs. I think one of the things last year that the Chiefs experienced is they experienced a ton of doubt, not only at the start of last season, but in the middle of the season. They faced a lot of scrutiny on, this team is not complete. They're not going anywhere. This is probably, some analysts were saying this is the worst Chiefs that's ever been assembled, during Andy Reid's tenure as there. And which is crazy to begin with, considering they still had Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. They didn't have as many weapons as they did before, obviously, because of the Tyreek Hill departure from the season prior to that. So, there's a lot of now I don't think as much scrutiny for the Chiefs to say that they're not going to win. I think there's a lot of apprehension that they're going to three-peat because, again, it's so difficult. But, you look what they did with the draft, with drafting Xavier Worthy. Rashid Rice is now coming into his second year, which he turned out to be a very good rookie, especially during that playoff run. Then you have Isaiah Pacheco still on the team. You have a defense that did really well for them throughout the season. They don't have any issues right now with Chris Jones in terms of like a contract issue or injury. He's coming into the season quite healthy. And some would think that this is probably the prime opportunity that they're going to have. But I actually just want to just say, I don't think that it's possible, or not that it's not possible. Let me reframe that. I think the odds are more stacked against them than we realized. One of the things that I was thinking about too is, there was, I want to say it was a podcast I saw. It was Draymond Green, I believe, was on the Barbershop podcast, which is the one that LeBron James hosts along with Rich Paul and, the Uninterrupted. I believe it's the Uninterrupted Productions. And he basically said that, what was tough is throughout the season when you're competing for championships is the season itself is hard, not because of the competition, but because of complacency. It's really hard to get up and want to go against, I think he said, Charlotte as an example, meaning, Charlotte's never really that competitive and it's almost a meaningless game. So why put in the effort? How can you get yourself up for it? He was just making the point of that. And I want to say that I don't think the Chiefs are in that realm, but I think complacency is a real thing. Last season we were seeing some flashes of the Chiefs where they were making careless decisions, especially Patrick Mahomes, where he was turning the ball over a little bit more uncharacteristically. Part of that was because the receiving core just, wasn't doing very well. Kadarius Toney, for example, just couldn't catch anything for a while. They had Sky Moore on the team who, he has a lot of talent, but it just doesn't seem like they were utilizing him that much. And, they just didn't seem like they had a legit number one receiver to, threaten the defenses with. And, now that they've won back-to-back titles essentially, and they're going for a three-peat, I can't help but imagine that, them going and playing some team, that has no business, being on the same field as them, they're going to want to, get up and be motivated and just take every game as it is, and plus a lot of teams now have really bolstered their offense. They've changed their defense. They're getting a lot more competitive. A lot of teams are structuring their drafts, their offense, their defense to beat the Chiefs. It's not even to now be, the best team ever assembled. It's now just strictly constructed to just beat the Chiefs because, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, that offense, they just haven't been beaten. They've won, going on their third title, but they've won 2 titles in a row. They've won one a couple of years prior, and they've never not gone to the AFC Championship game. So, definitely I think complacency is a big thing that the Chiefs will probably have to fight with majority of the season, which I think would, catch them off guard sometimes. I wouldn't be surprised if I see them lose some games that should be winnable. And that happens every season. Also, too, I wouldn't be surprised if the team just lacks discipline for majority of the season until maybe playoff run. And I don't know, maybe they'd be in a wild card contention, or maybe they're fighting for the number 1 seed. And you can just tell, like, okay, now there's a worry. Are they going to fall off? And I don't want to compare them to the Eagles of last season for, starting off like 8-0 and then finishing the season at an abysmal like 3-3 and like 9 or something of that nature. But, I do think that the Chiefs do have that kind of complacency that kind of can get to there. Also, too, with playing as deep into the season as they do for 6 straight seasons, especially Patrick Mahomes, it takes a toll on the body. So most of these teams, of course, the NFL season is 18 weeks, 17 games with a bye somewhere in the middle of the season or earlier into the season. And then you're playing towards the end of the season if you get in a playoff berth. And fortunately, the Chiefs has usually gotten like a first round bye where they play maybe 2 games where they're playing the divisional round and then the conference round. And then, they play the Super Bowl. Just based on that, that's 3 extra games. So essentially, for the last 6 seasons, they've been playing anywhere between 20 to 21, 22 games, maybe, if the math adds up to that, for the last 5 to 6 seasons. That's a lot of wear and tear and pain and a lot of, injuries that are due. Like Patrick Mahomes' only big injury that he's had is he had the foot injury 2 seasons ago. And then I think the season prior to that, he had the dislocated kneecap, which kept him out for a couple of weeks. But other than that, not a whole lot of huge injuries that have sacked the season, pun intended. But, coming into this season, I think the injury bug might be pretty prevalent in this. And depending on who the star is, maybe it's a Kelsey, maybe it's Isaiah Pacheco, maybe it's Rashid Rice, maybe it's Patrick Mahomes, who knows? But I think with the amount of seasons in a row that they've played deep into the playoffs, into the Super Bowl, the extra games added on top of that, I just think it takes a toll on the body. And, eventually that's going to catch up to them. And I would not be surprised if this was the season where they just, suffered from the injury bug and it really hindered their full potential. So that's another one. And, as again, I've said that this has never been done in the history of the NFL. So that's also kind of going against them. Like the Patriots, for example, I believe it was in 07 when they were going for the undefeated season. In the regular season, they went 16-0. And then, of course, inevitably lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl, which was the most important game of the entire season. And even still, like that in itself was a great feat, but they just couldn't finish all the way. And of course, the 72 Dolphins, everyone knows, the only undefeated team to win everything and not be challenged or beaten. So we're dealing with a lot of history. We're dealing with mathematically, it is more likely not to happen in terms of that three-peat rather than they will three-peat. So we already have odds against us. We have history against us. And again, as I mentioned, we have injuries that potentially could happen, especially with the longevity of a season that they've gone through for several seasons now. And again, I think that complacency is something for them to think about. So that's all the points right there. My final one, and it's not really as big of a point as I wanted to make as the first couple of them, but I have questions on their defense. Is it going to be a good defense? Is it going to be a defense that gives up a lot of points? Is it going to make the offense have to go in multiple shootouts? They did lose Snead in the offseason. I don't think that their defense is better. And, you have Steve Spagnuolo that's been there for several seasons now. And usually in the regular season, his defense has to go through majority of the season working out the kinks. And then they get to a point where, okay, now they're stout or they're very difficult. But what typically happens is the offense just gets into this barrage of scoring points where they just have these leads over teams. And now the teams are changing the game plan from, playing fundamental football, running the ball, letting plays develop, to now having to air it out and making them one-dimensional, which the Chiefs bank on you doing because, again, they have an offense that can speed up and score points in very, very quickly. And the other teams don't necessarily have that. And a lot of, other teams' offenses is predicated on a run game, getting your, getting play action involved, maybe getting a tight end involved here and there. And then, taking a chance, where the Chiefs are just all about, sometimes they may dunk and throw a bunch of screens. Other times they're going to really air it out with Travis Kelce, or they're going to take deep shots, or Patrick Mahomes specifically will create a lot of that improvised offense where he is, scrambling, finding an open guy, and defenses can't really, hold defensive assignments for 10 to 12 seconds while, the quarterback is running around like what Patrick Mahomes will do. So, but I do think that their defense, though, is something that I would wonder, could it hold up to a lot of the offensive pressures that other teams now have? Because like I said, a lot of teams are now building their offense, their defense in a way to combat, Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs offense. So we'll see. But my very first bold prediction is I don't think that the Chiefs are going to three-peat this season. I think somebody else is going to take home the Lombardi trophy. I do think the Chiefs will get into the playoffs, no doubt. They're a playoff team as we sit here today, but I don't think that they will three-peat this season. And I know there are some NFL analysts that are suspecting that they will and have picked them as their Super Bowl favorite, which, a betting man might take those odds. But I just looking at history statistically and all the other factors in between, I would say it's very, very tough to consider that. My number two bold prediction in my top 5 predictions is I believe Caleb Williams will be an MVP candidate as a rookie. I think this is probably something that's not too bold of a take, just like the Chiefs one. Caleb Williams at USC showed great flashes. I would argue that some of his play in USC, sure was a lot of the offensive line breaking down and him having to scramble a lot. Some part of me thought that, it was a lot of like lazy technique and just, a lot of improvisation that probably didn't need to happen. And, to me, with Lincoln Riley as your coach, I would have thought there would have been more success. Granted, more competition when Lincoln Riley got there and USC was playing, so maybe that factored into it. But for some of the clips that we have seen and some of the highlights that we've seen of Caleb Williams in this Bears offense, there's actually an offensive line now that's been protecting Caleb Williams in the preseason so far. He's had great throws. He's got great scrambling ability. I think one of the things that benefits him with him being in the NFL is there's a little bit more freedom, I'd imagine, with him being a mobile quarterback, being able to make a play. Whereas I can see in college, like their spread offenses, you want to move quickly, but I can imagine they're not looking too much for the quarterback to scramble just because, a lot of teams, how they play a lot of soft defense will allow you to go over the top. And, college football, in my opinion, is just a lot of like big chunk plays, whether it's a run play, a pass play. The NFL sometimes makes you earn it, but there's a lot of freedom when you're a mobile quarterback, it seems like, to, when a play breaks down, get out of the way, make a play. You're going to risk injury no matter what, but you look at players like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, who we just talked about, Anthony Richardson, but that's kind of a bad example because he gets injured all the time. But, any mobile quarterback that uses their legs to break free, which, then allows them to make a big play because defenses break down. I think Caleb Williams is going to excel at that. And some of the weapons that he was given before he was even drafted, with Keenan Allen, signing of DeAndre Swift, who I'm a huge fan of. He did great in Philadelphia last season. And now I think the Bears got a really good, dual threat running back. Obviously drafting that rookie out of Washington, Odunze, is great. Like, that is a great, quarterback and receiver combo that's going to develop together. DJ Moore is still on the team. And so there's like 3 legit number ones, but I think we can understand that the hierarchy is probably DJ Moore 1. Probably Keenan Allen is more running into the slot just because of how skilled of a receiver he is when it comes to his routes. Odunze is probably running, on the outside, or maybe even coming across the middle most of the time. And also, too, the defensive players and the defensive help that they brought in this offseason to even be more of a challenge on the opposite side of the ball. I will say they're in a very challenging division in the North, where you got the Packers, who are up and coming. You have the Lions, who are probably the biggest threat. A little bit out on the Vikings just because J.J. McCarthy is out for the season because of a preseason injury. Can Sam Darnold, do well? I think if there's any coach that's going to be able to coach up Sam Darnold, would be Kevin O'Connell, and he's done that with Keenan Allen, with Kirk Cousins. I can't even remember some of the quarterbacks he had last year where he still made him very productive. And then you have an all-world receiver and Justin Jefferson still on the Vikings that, makes you competitive no matter who's throwing the ball. But I do think that Caleb Williams, not only is he probably in the running for obviously rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year, but I do think that he would be an MVP candidate. I would say like top 3, and I would not be surprised top 2, because if this rookie quarterback can take the Bears from being whatever they were, like a 4 and whatever team, a 5 and whatever team, I can't remember how many wins they had last season, and then turn them into a playoff team where they are potentially 9 wins, 10 wins, depending on how competitive they are, how the other teams that they're playing against, how they fare. 11 wins is not too far out of the realm. It does sound hard to believe, considering that they would almost be doubling their win total from the season prior, but it's not out of the realm to assume that the Bears could win 10 games, 11 games, very much like what Andrew Luck did when he got drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. And they were so bad the year before they were awarded the number 1 pick. And then when they drafted him, he took him to the playoffs, or I think at least a wild card berth in his first year. I could see Caleb Williams doing that, and with the weapons that he has, makes this offense more explosive and more competitive, to where, in the NFC, what other wild card teams do we suspect are going to be in there? Do we think that the Seahawks are going to be a wild card team? Do we think that the Rams are? Do we really think that New Orleans is going to, or excuse me, do we really think that anyone in the NFC South is going to be able to produce more than just the divisional winner? NFC East, are they going to have more than just one team? In theory, right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are probably the strongest team in that East. Are they going to be able to produce a second playoff team to go for the wild card? I don't know. I think the Bears have a pretty good shot at making a wild card, getting into the playoffs with this kind of style of team that they have and how young they are. But I do think it would be all because Caleb Williams just changed this franchise, changed this team because of his playmaking ability, the throws that he can make, the improvisation that he does, very similar to Patrick Mahomes, and the spark that it'd be giving the Bears. I mean, legit, there has never been a quarterback in their franchise history that I can remember, even at the time I've been watching football, that has ever come close to the talent that Caleb Williams has and potentially could change this Bears franchise and make them a legit contender. So that's what I would say. So that'd be my second bold take, is I think Caleb Williams will be an MVP candidate as a rookie. My third bold take is I believe the Las Vegas Raiders. Yes, of course, I'm going to include my Las Vegas Raiders. We are on the cusp of the NFL season. I'm going to include them in my top 5 bold NFL predictions. My bold prediction, though, for my Las Vegas Raiders is we will finish second in the AFC West, excuse me. And here's some of my points as to why. Look, we have Jim Harbaugh, who's, coaching the Chargers. There's a lot of question marks on what their receiving core is going to look like. You have Palmer, who's essentially their number one. I know that they drafted that kid out of Georgia. I'm forgetting his name. The route running specialist. And their defense is pretty much intact. They still have Khalil Mack. They still have Joey Bosa. Asante Samuel Jr. is still on that side of the ball. Derwin James. But my question is that offense going to be enough to put up points? I'm not quite sure about their run attack. Can that offensive line stay healthy? Justin Herbert, can he stay healthy? So I think the Chargers, are maybe a team that is a season away, maybe 2 seasons, depending on how they draft, of being an actual AFC threat like they were supposed to be a couple of seasons ago, when they're probably at the height of their powers. I just don't know if they're quite there yet. With the Denver Broncos, yes, they have that rookie quarterback, Bo Nix. No, and no shade to Bo Nix. I think he's a really good quarterback. I would have loved if the Raiders would have drafted him 10th overall. Probably not, but if he slid in the second round, I think that would have been a really good steal for the Raiders. But, the Broncos felt the need to draft Bo Nix. He looked pretty good in some preseason games. Their offense, I'm still questioning. Their run game, is it going to be consistent? Can that offensive line stay healthy? Their defense, how does that look? Because they only have really one Patrick Surtain II who's still there. They got a couple of other pieces, but really he's their only main star, their only main defensive weapon that they have. And is that going to be enough to get them through the season? Again, they play the Chiefs twice, they play the Chargers twice, they're playing the Raiders twice. Not to mention they have a pretty tough schedule. Sean Payton still needs to prove if he has the ability to even turn around this franchise. He did much better with the season before with Russell Wilson, who they no longer have on the team. Still made them somewhat competitive, but now this is essentially Sean Payton's quarterback. Some of the weapons that they have, I'm wondering if they can stay healthy. I know that Courtland Sutton is coming off of 2 catastrophic injuries where he's essentially missed multiple seasons or multiple games in the last few seasons. They, have released Tim Patrick. They traded away Jerry Jeudy, it's actually a smart deal that they did that because he wasn't very competitive for them considering where they drafted him. So I think there's just a lot of offensive question marks I have for the Denver Broncos. I don't know if the Broncos are the 3rd best team or the 4th best team. And so I just have so many more questions about them. For the Raiders. So first off, with our quarterback situation, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, it is what it is. I'm not the hugest fan of the options. I would have much rather have drafted a quarterback. I know that there was rumors that during draft day, the Raiders tried everything they can to trade away draft picks to get up to the second pick to get Jaden Daniels. Didn't work. And again, a lot of quarterbacks flew early. It was kind of like that mock draft. It's kind of like that NFL fantasy football draft that you have with your friends, where you got one person who really reaches for a quarterback too soon, and then it makes everybody else spontaneously panic. And now, so everyone else has to take a quarterback immediately after that. That's what that kind of reminded me of. A lot of quarterbacks, Michael Penix Jr. was taken, some arguments could make, way too soon. He was taken 9th overall, and most mock drafts had him going in the 2nd round. Bo Nix, very similar. A lot of them had him, going just outside of the 1st round, maybe in the middle of the 2nd round. Just a lot of questionable quarterbacks being taken early. And so the Raiders didn't really do anything to address the quarterback situation outside of that. Like, I think what they're doing is they're looking for a quarterback that could maintain, just don't lose games. I think they're looking for just the best game manager they can find. We do have Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers. We now drafted Brock Bowers, who's a very, very good tight end. Bolster the offensive line a little bit, but I have questions on that. Can we stay healthy? Can they play as a unit? Defense, we played really well defense last season towards the end, especially when AP took over. We allowed little to no points to be scored. Can we duplicate that? And also, when our offense is really not picking up the slack, can the defense carry that momentum and keep giving us opportunities? Because if the offense fails the defense to where the defense just gets tired and is giving up points that way because they don't have any energy to defense against, giving the ball back, can the Raiders offense counter that and actually be productive and put points up and, be able to weather the storm? I do think, though, with Gardner Minshew, I know there's a lot of heat on him because, was his performance in the preseason great? No. Was his performance, or was Aiden O'Connell's performance great? No. And I think that's where I'm at with at least the quarterback situation. It is what it is. It's not going to get any better. I personally think that Dak Prescott's not going to re-sign a long-term deal with Dallas, and he's going to be a free agent. And I think the best landing spot for him, and I think he knows this, is the best place for him to go would be Las Vegas. So I would not be surprised if Las Vegas is the team that reaps the benefits to getting Dak Prescott next season, because the Dallas Cowboys aren't going to want to sign Dak Prescott to a long-term deal. And I think the Raiders are going to do that. Also, the next season that comes up in that draft class for quarterbacks, not the greatest, not as good as the class that we just had. The class that we just had, arguably one of the best that we've seen in terms of potential talent. You got the top 2 quarterbacks already starting for their teams and are probably going to make an immediate impact on those teams as whenever the season starts. And next season, there's not a quarterback out there that you can say the same with. And don't tell me Shedeur Sanders. I don't want to hear that. So I do think that the Raiders are probably in the market to get Dak Prescott, since he's not re-signed to a long-term deal before the start of the regular season. With that being said, I think, Gardner Minshew is probably the best game manager we have. He's got to work on his accuracy, which I don't know if you can really work on throughout the season. But I think having a receiver like Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, they're both very good receivers. I think that will help. I think Brock Bowers is going to be like a security blanket for Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a QB change some point in the season. It's bound to happen, especially with a lot of scrutiny with how they both played in the preseason. I'd expect more out of both, and we'll see if they rise and answer the bell, so to speak. But I do think with what the Raiders have, I think that they are better positioned to be the second best team in the AFC. Now, a couple episodes ago, I want to say last episode, in fact, I predicted, and my expectations were the Raiders, that we were an 8-9 we were 8-9 football team, 8-9, 9-8, somewhere around there. We're either below 500 or above 500. We're about that good. I don't think we're good enough to get a number 1 pick. I don't think we're good enough to get, the 31st pick or whatever. I think that we are a team that's probably going to be 8-9, 9-8, we're going to be on that graphic that SportsCenter always shows about teams that are on the outside of the wild card hunt and that are in the running, but we're too far away. We need too many things to fall our way in order to make a wild card, all that kind of things. I think that's where the Raiders at. I don't think, however, the Chargers or the Broncos are any better in a position. And in fact, I think the Raiders today are in a better position to potentially get the second place in the AFC West rather than the Chargers and the Broncos. Does that mean I think the Broncos are going to be like 1-16? No. 4, 5, 6 wins potentially. Chargers, I feel the same. I feel like there are 6 to 7 wins, maybe even 8 as well. I feel like all of these teams outside of the Chargers are probably going to split with each other. So right there's already, 3 losses for everybody. And I do think that we will be very competitive with the Chiefs. We beat them last season. I think it was the Christmas game where we played great defense and really turned that around. And I think that that's a great omen for what could come. Offensively, I'm a little worried, but we have some great weapons. We have some really good weapons. We just need to have a comparable quarterback. I think we have a comparable quarterback that'll be okay. And I just think that our team is in position to fight for the second place of the AFC West. And that would be great. Now, again, it's a bold prediction. We need to see how everything shakes out. Injuries can play into a fact of this. Other teams may get really good. Trade deadlines. I know that there's a rumor that the Raiders are going to trade Devontae Adams at the trade deadline. I don't think so. I think he's going to stay put. That's some white noise, and I don't think that's anything to listen to. My number 4 bold prediction of the NFL season is I think the 49ers are have the potential to miss the playoffs. And here's why. They're going to be coming off of a Super Bowl hangover. And the last 4 seasons, they have been riddled with nothing but injuries. Injuries at pivotal times to pivotal players that hinder them. A couple seasons ago, I think it was Jimmy Garoppolo, it was Trey Lance injured, bringing Jimmy Garoppolo injured. Then you had Brock Purdy injury, really hindered them, and I believe that injury happened in the NFC Championship game against the Eagles when the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. And then this past season, yes, they went all the way to the Super Bowl, lost to the Chiefs, which is a tough one, and majority of the time, teams that lose in the Super Bowl do not get back there, and they also have a harder season the following. For example, when the LA Rams defeated the Cincinnati Bengals, the Bengals made it to the playoffs, did not get to the Super Bowl again. And in fact, argument can be made that they regressed a little bit because, if I'm not mistaken, that was the season that Joe Burrow started the season injured with a strained calf, and he played through it, and they struggled. I think they went like 2-5 or 2-4, I think, to start the season, and then they had to claw their way back. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they won the wild card because they didn't clinch the division. I believe that was the Ravens. The Eagles went to the Super Bowl again, lost to the Chiefs, and they had a really bad following season. In fact, it was the season that just played out where they barely made it out of their own division. I don't even think they won their division. They made it in a wild card, and they lost that wild card round, and was bounced, and never recovered, never did well. Granted, there's a lot of internal fighting going on, according to reports about coaches and players and all that other stuff. But again, Super Bowl hangover did not get it. And again, the 49ers on this go around lose, and the way that they lost, where it was, they lost a lead, which is not the first time that's happened under Kyle Shanahan's reign to the Chiefs. In fact, that's the second time that's happened. In fact, Kyle Shanahan was on the Falcons team that blew that, was it 35 to, was it 28-3 lead, against the Patriots. He was on that team. He was the offensive coordinator. So, I think that the 49ers, too, this injury bug that always hits them, I think is going to hit them hard. Christian McCaffrey, again, was the Madden cover athlete for the NFL video game. I'm not really superstitious, but it's kind of weird how, or not weird, it's kind of interesting how majority of the players that were on the cover get injured, don't do really well the following season. I think Patrick Mahomes is the only exception. When he shared the cover, I think, with Tom Brady. I think he's really the only exception. Outside of that, though, like, I think that the 49ers have a lot to fight against. Their division is getting better. The Cardinals, I would argue, have gotten better. The LA Rams have potentially gotten better, or at least a stronger team. The Seahawks have improved defensively, and their offense looks really good according to the preseason. So they've got now a tougher division. I think the Eagles are getting better, have gotten better now with the new OC and Kellen Moore and some of the players that they've added defensively and offensively. I think that they're much better. The Lions are much better. So I just think that I think the 49ers have a tough road ahead of them. And I would not be surprised if because of injury, they missed the playoffs. I think that they are a team that, are going to surprise people with, first off, the injuries that will affect them if there is any injuries. And also too, like the, excuse me, that will affect them and that will, again, hinder their potential to where they'll always be like, if this player didn't get injured, if that player didn't get injured, if we would have done this, done that. They haven't even re-signed Brandon Ayuk. They haven't traded him yet. We have no idea what his status is heading into the regular season. Doesn't look like he's going to play right now. So there's all that kind of distraction. Trent Williams, are they going to sign him to a long-term deal before the start of the season? He wasn't at camp at all. He was on a holdout. So I just think there's too many things that are going against the 49ers. And I've heard some say that their window is not closed, but it's closing. I think that's very true. And I think this might be the season where that window gets shut a little bit more and that opening just gets a little slimmer. So I think that that's a big one. I've heard a lot of questions about, can Brock Purdy duplicate what he did last season? So we'll see. I think the 49ers, though, should be looked at and potential of not making the playoffs. I think I'm just being honest on that fact. My number 5 bold prediction is I believe the Houston Texans will be the best team in the AFC. I believe they'll be the number 1 seed. I believe that they'll be one of the top offenses in the AFC. They had a very good first season with D'Amico Ryans, CJ Stroud. And again, they battled through injuries too. Tank Dell was injured for a bit. Nico Collins was injured for a bit. Dalton Schultz was injured for a bit. They went out and they got Stephon Diggs from the Bills. They went out and they signed Joe Mixon. Their offensive line has improved. Their defense has improved. They've drafted some more great players. They still have very good defensive players. I think that this young team is poised to make a run very similar to the Cincinnati Bengals. They weren't the number 1 team in the AFC, but they were a very good offensive team, and they outplayed their competition more times than not, which led them to the Super Bowl, where they, eventually lost to the LA Rams. But I think I think that the Houston Texans are a team that will be the number 1 team in the AFC. I know there's a lot of stiff competition with like Baltimore Ravens is very good. The Buffalo Bills, some would argue also the New York Jets, Miami Dolphins. I think those are all super competitive teams. Obviously the Chiefs, of course. I don't mean to not leave them in there and to say like the Chiefs don't stand a chance. I think if there's any team in the NFL that can match up with the Chiefs is the Texans, and vice versa. I think those are the 2 AFC teams that will probably meet each other at some point in the divisional round of the AFC playoffs or even the conference championship. But I do think that the AFC will be ruled by the Houston Texans as the number 1 seed, and rightfully so. They have a very good team. I'm a fan of D'Amico Ryans. I'm a fan of CJ Stroud. My brother-in-law, who is a diehard Houston Texans fan, hopefully he's listening. Hopefully he appreciates that, because for some years, the Texans were going through it, man. I mean, they had that whole DeShaun Watson fiasco. They were having to rebuild from that. And now they are a very respectable team. They don't look like that team that's going to let go of their first-year head coach again after a mediocre season. They went all the way to the wild card, couldn't get over it because they were just a little too young. And now they look like they're poised to be the best team in the AFC, and they're gearing up to be it. And they are very confident. And I'm hoping that they answer the call, and I'm hoping that they do remain competitive and meet the expectations that I'm setting for them. So those are my top 5 bold predictions of the NFL season. And again, I'll run through them. Top 5 bold predictions for the NFL season. 1, Chiefs will not three-peat. They will not, again, and as I mentioned previously. Number 2, Caleb Williams will be an MVP candidate as a rookie. Number 3, the Raiders will finish second in the AFC West. Number 4, the injury bug will affect the 49ers, and they will potentially miss the playoffs. And I'm actually going to say right now, I think they will miss the playoffs, or they will not make a wild card is what I'll say, because they are still a talented team, but I think there's potential that they could miss out on a playoff berth.
It's now time for bed.
Thank you. Number 5, the Houston Texans will be the best team in the AFC. And I'm actually saying they will be the number 1 AFC team when seeding happens for the playoffs. So those are my top 5 bold predictions of the NFL season upcoming. Let me know down below if you guys agree with them, or if I missed something, or what you guys would say to combat that. Really looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say, because I don't for sure think that these are etched in stone, but I mean, these are some things I think could realistically happen. And, I'm sure there's a lot of 49er fans that say otherwise, because, it's Niner Empire and they're, Niners all the way, and I hope so. But also too, wouldn't be mad if you guys missed the playoffs either. So, all right, so I've got one more segment and then we're done for the show. So I've got a fantasy football segment. So as you guys have seen on obviously our social medias on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, I've been kind of posting a couple of clips of our last episode where we did, Would You Rather Fantasy Football Edition. We did a couple of big names in the world of fantasy football and in the NFL to see who would you rather on your team. And that was a fun one. The one I just posted earlier today, and actually I think last night, was the one for CJ Stroud and Patrick Mahomes. So go check that out on our social media when you guys get a chance. These are my 3 players that I am weary of having on my team. Not even drafting. I am weary to have them on my team. However, depending on how your league is set up, maybe you have some crazy 16 team, league, and you got all this weird stuff going on. So you might need these players. I'm about to have a draft with my cousins and some other friends where we do a super flex where we have essentially you can have 2 quarterbacks in your starting lineup. That draft is always crazy because, typical draft strategy, and I'll speak for myself, is, you go after the number 1 running back or receiver that's available that you like in your first pick, whatever that is. And then second round comes. I usually like to do either, again, depending if I'm picking running back or receiver, I will then pick the opposite. Or hypothetically, let's say I picked a receiver number 1 in my first round pick. My second and third round pick will probably be my running back pair following that. Fourth round will probably be a receiver. Fifth round pick, depending on the quarterback situation, I may either select quarterback 5th round, or I may keep going with my running back receiver combination until I feel like, okay, I'm ready for a tight end or a quarterback. And then I usually go pretty late when it comes to quarterback and tight end. Unless there's a tight end who I got to have on my team, I may then use like my 5th or 6th round pick. That's normally my strategy when it comes to fantasy football. However, like I mentioned, in my cousin's league that we're about to have this weekend, is a super flex. And so you can start 2 quarterbacks. So of course, what ends up happening every year is the whole notion of not drafting a quarterback until later in the round. This is if you want a good quality all around team. Your quarterback is probably going to be later in the draft. Earliest is like the 8th round. I've gone as late as like the 11th round. It's still gotten a good quarterback. Your backup is probably not going to be like a potential starter. It's a backup. But in our league with the 2 quarterbacks, quarterback is probably going in the first 10 to 12 picks for sure. In fact, we've had one season where Patrick Mahomes was the number one quarterback taken in our league. And again, it's a 2-quarterback league. And sure enough, as soon as someone takes the first quarterback, quarterbacks fall right off the board outside of that. So you could be taken in your first round pick a quarterback. And I try not to fall in that trap. But again, how this league has gone out is if you kind of avoid the quarterback position, it has literally one game. So I have had games against some of the friends in this league where they have a very good 1 and 2 quarterback and they have really nothing in terms of everything else. Like their running backs are weak, their receivers are weak, tight end is weak, so on and so forth. Where I will have the opposite. I will have very good receivers, very good running backs, very good depth, and my quarterbacks are subpar. And 9 out of 10 times in this league, the 2 quarterbacks of the opposite team that are scoring all the points are what's carrying them to victory rather than, my team of receivers and running backs. So quarterback is important in this league. And so 9 out of 10 times, like, you want to draft your quarterback early. So I preference all that to say that these 3 players that I'm weary about is who I may not add on my team for the reasons I'm going to give. Number 1 in the quarterback slot to lead it off, as I said, I just went down that jargon of quarterback, DeShaun Watson. He's coming off of an injury. He has not looked great in the 2.5 seasons that he has been back. Since he has returned to the NFL, he does not look like the same DeShaun Watson as he did in Houston. He looks like a shell of himself. He had some flashes last season, and then he got injured. And of course, there's just no value there. I would not draft DeShaun Watson. I would not add him on my team. I would be extremely wary of DeShaun Watson. If you don't need DeShaun Watson, do not draft him. I don't think it's worth it. I know that in Cleveland, they still have, Amari Cooper. They just added Jerry Jeudy. Nick Chubb is going to start on the pup list, so he's not going to be available. And there's, I think it's Njoku is on. David Njoku is on there. That's just not enough for me to have confidence in drafting DeShaun Watson. So I would be weary of DeShaun Watson. In fact, I would avoid DeShaun Watson drafting or otherwise. I don't think he's going to be a productive player on a roster. Number 2, this is in the running back position, and running back is at a premium because there's so minimal talent when it comes to running back. Like after you go through like the top 10 running back players that are productive, everything else is a crapshoot. Last season, James Conner was one of those players that started off hot as he was, you can plug him in as an RB1, maybe an RB2, and you were going to get great production out of him while he was with the Cardinals. And he was rushing for a bunch of touchdowns, dual threat. Then he gets injured, and he has a long list of an injury history. And it goes all the way back to when he was a Pittsburgh Steeler. No different this past season where he missed out on some games. When he came back, slow start, did not catch fire in the last, I think it was like 3 weeks of the season, finally came to life, but it just doesn't make me confident to want to have him on the team. Maybe early on, like if you're not going to draft him, maybe you're going to pick him up off the waiver wire and use him for a couple of games. Maybe that's an option, but I would be weary of James Conner. And here's why. We always hear about the age of the running backs, and no running back over said age has ever rushed over said yards and whatever. And I think that is true. I mean, NFL scouts, they kind of run their teams very similar to that. Like look at Austin Eckler, no longer with the Chargers, now with the Commanders, now considered an older running back. I think he just turned 30 this season. And, he's now competing with Brian Robinson of the Commanders for, RB1, probably he's an RB2 over there. And James Conner, the Cardinals drafted in the 3rd round, a running back who is known very similar to being a pass catching running back. In fact, very similar build to James Conner himself, younger. In fact, I think the kid's like 22, 23, and James Conner is 29 now. I think he's going to turn 30 in the season. And, again, with his injury history, with his age, I just don't know if having James Conner is something that I'm going to jump at, considering there might be some other options that can get you by outside of having James Conner. I think James Conner is a risk a little bit when you draft him or have him on your team, just because availability is in question, his age, his health, all that stuff kind of factors in. And with what the Cardinals are doing, they're kind of going younger. Is that offense even going to look like it's got to function right with having Connor in there? I'd be weary of that. So James Conner is another player that I'm weary to have on my team. And the final one is a little bit of a shock, and I don't want it to be a huge shock. I just want to put it in some perspective. I think Hollywood Brown is a wide receiver I would be very weary about. When he signed in the offseason of the Chiefs, it was a big one that we all thought, oh my gosh, here the Chiefs are, the rich getting richer, that big explosive receiver that goes over the top, that speedster. And then they drafted Xavier Worthy, who has really good flashes in the preseason. By the way, he's from the Valley, so got to represent. Not only that, but Rashid Rice has looked like a very good wide receiver one, and he's probably going to take a leap forward this season in terms of production. Travis Kelce is still on the team. Hollywood Brown is very notorious for having a hot start, then trailing off. He did go through some injuries last season where he wasn't with, I believe he was with the Cardinals. Was he with the Cardinals or with the Ravens? Maybe it was with the Ravens. Whatever team he was on, I'm forgetting, so forgive me for that. But the previous team he was on, he was, showing a lot of flashes and, did well early in the season to where he was a hot name, cooled off, missed some time with some injury, which has been a repeat thing. He's only went over 1,000 yards one time in his career. And then when he came back, he still just wasn't the same Hollywood Brown that probably most people either traded for because of that hot start, or if maybe you took a late round flyer on him, you were banking on that production, and he just never was the same from early part in the season. And again, like I said, with the Chiefs, you have Xavier Worthy, Isaiah Pacheco. You just have so many more offensive weapons than Hollywood Brown. I just have this uneasy feeling that Hollywood Brown is probably going to be an injured receiver. He's got to be good this season for spurts. He's got to be good enough to where, oh yeah, maybe I should have him on my team. Maybe he is worthy of a start. And then he may only get a couple of targets, because also too, if you're not Tyreek Hill, Andy Reid's office does not cater to one person. It goes everywhere. Travis Kelce has only been the beneficiary because, of course, when the play breaks down, Patrick Mahomes is scrambling. Travis Kelce just knows how to scramble to kind of get open and just make a play. And, thankfully with Travis Kelce's athletic ability has made that happen for the last several seasons. I just don't know if Hollywood Brown is going to be on the field enough to experience that, just because of, again, the amount of receiver depth now that the Chiefs have added, and of course the health factor with Hollywood Brown. So we'll see, but I would be weary of Hollywood Brown. In fact, I would say, like, I probably wouldn't draft. I probably wouldn't pick up unless I can get some actual proof that he is going to stay healthy, going to stay on the field, going to be effective. And I just think there's too many other receivers that the Chiefs will plug in there that are going to be healthy, that'll be available. Then that's why I'm weary of Hollywood Brown. So just to repeat, these are my three players to be weary of for fantasy football. Quarterback, DeShaun Watson, super weary of him for obvious reasons. Number 2, James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals, very weary of that for the age, production, health. And then the third one is wide receiver Hollywood Brown. Again, the amount of receiver depth that was added this season. Yes, he's a veteran. Yes, he's a young receiver. They also have that in some of these other ones. And I don't know if I can trust Hollywood Brown's health and the amount of targets that he'll get. We'll see if he's utilized enough in Andy Reid's office, but I would be very weary of Hollywood Brown. So that's it for me, you guys. That's pretty much all I had for tonight. I just had those NFL stuff and some fantasy football I wanted to run by you. That was fun for me, just under an hour here. So hopefully it doesn't take up too much of your guys' time to give us a listen. I do want to plug a couple of shows real quick. Obviously, of course, I'm going to plug Drew Code Sports Talk. Please go and follow us on our podcast platforms. Again, you can listen to us on Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us on. You can also watch our videos on YouTube. Also, all of our podcast episodes are on there as well. So you can go back and watch them. You can watch clips from certain episodes of certain topics. That's all available on our YouTube. Highly recommend that you guys subscribe and follow along with us. And also to continue on that, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, I'm usually the ones that's running the socials. So I'm the one that's usually commenting with you guys and going back and forth. And, recently posted, a would you rather with Tyreek Hill and CD Lamb. That one's getting a lot of traction and getting a lot of people that, are upset with some of the takes. And again, it's just takes. It's kind of funny how it's creating this dialogue, and it lets us know like what you guys would rather do or who you guys would pick. And I love hearing all that. So I want to hear the same from you guys. So follow us, and you're probably talking to me 90% of the time. And I'd love to interact with everyone. Second show I do want to give a shout out to is Andrew just launched his Sanger West podcast on Monday. It is a new show. It's going to be under the Drew Code umbrella. So it's going to be coming out on our feed. It also will go up on YouTube under the Drew Code name, but you will see, the title card. You will see the thumbnail it's called Inside the Hornets Hive with Andrew Wright. He is known as the voice of the Sanger West Hornets, as he does, the announcements, and I would say a little bit of play-by-play in a former fashion with the Sanger West High School here in town. He does the football, he does basketball, he also coaches basketball, and he does baseball. He's kind of getting more involved into the sports aspect of it all, and so he's going to do his best to bring you guys weekly updates. Right now he's in football season, so he's going to try to bring you weekly updates of the football season, and also of some other stuff that's going on, especially in basketball, what he's more involved in. He can probably get more intel in that, but it's just an easy podcast of him. Basically what he does is he kind of gives his post-game reactions, coming home from the game. He usually sends me a message on Marco Polo about how the game goes. And this time we're putting it on a video and putting it up and having all you guys listen to it. So that way you guys can hear him talk about Sanger West and hear him talk about pride and, see the school kind of just progress when it comes to like sports and athletics. And I think it's a pretty easy listen. I think that first episode is only 15 minutes, and it's all a pretty quick listen. And he gets a nice little interview from one of the coaches. So definitely go and check that out. You guys again can find that on our podcast umbrella. It'll just be posted with his show's name on it, and it'll just be on our feed. Same thing with YouTube when we post his videos for his new show. It'll be under the Drew Code umbrella, so you guys can find it on our YouTube page. So anyway, guys, that's it for me. Again, I really do appreciate you guys listening and bearing with me as I went through this show solo. I hope you guys excuse the ums and the hums and all the grammar fractions in between. And I hope that you guys join us next week. And I hope you guys can leave us a review and communicate and comment with us and hang out. And can't wait to do it again next week. And, look out for some fantasy football content that we'll be posting, especially with some mock draft stuff, and also to updates on what leagues that we're involved in. That'll be all some fun stuff. So I bid you guys a farewell or good night. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll catch you next time, and we will see you. Don't forget to be kind to one another. Catch you next week.